My name's Eric Wittner. I'm the product manager for CityEngine and Procedural Technology at Esri. Joining me today is Brooks Patrick. He's an account executive in the 3D and geodesign space, does a lot of work with CityEngine and Procedural. And Pascal Mueller, who is the director of the Zurich R&D office where CityEngine is developed. What we wanted to do today is talk a little bit about how CityEngine can be used to create streets, public spaces, and buildings. About the state of CityEngine right now in 2016, what we did last year, and the features that we added. Brooks is going to talk to us a little bit about how that's being used in the planning space and consumed as a tool to do planning and also integrated with the platform. And Pascal is here to show us the future of CityEngine, give us a little sneak preview into CityEngine 2017.0 that's coming out and what's coming in 2017.1 this year. So how many of you know what CityEngine is? Raise your hand if you're a CityEngine user. Oh, a fair number. Well, I may go a little bit quicker through these slides. CityEngine is a tool for procedurally creating buildings, primarily creating really attractive buildings that are visually compelling to help sell designs and ideas. But it's also capable of improving our understanding of buildings by being able to generate performance metrics for buildings or understand kind of, for instance, the zoning that's inside the building. So in this case, we're seeing the usage inside the building on the right, commercial on the first floor with an office space above it, or the yellow in the background is residential, or generating metrics such as total runoff from the buildings based on whether it has a green roof or sloped roof or where the pitch is going. And being able to do those same kinds of things in public spaces, like on the streetscape, we can see the medians, right, and some of the green space on the sides of the roads, since they're a darker blue, are capturing some of that water and runoff. So it's not just a visual tool, but it can also be an analytical tool and a measuring tool as you're creating 3D content. And the reason why we're interested in procedural is it gives us this way to capture a set of rules and parameters that represent an existing 3D style, and then we could recreate that style rapidly using the rule without having to do all this manual modeling. And for us, that represents a huge value in the amount of time it takes to create 3D content, especially when you combine it with some of our platform tools for things like where you can extract information out of LiDAR. So you can use LiDAR to generate a bunch of building footprints, capture from that LiDAR a bunch of parameters on the shape and form of that building, and then use a procedural rule to generate and render that in 3D, and then consume it in your desktop products across ArcGIS and share it as a service for other people to view. And from the design perspective, the thing that makes it so compelling is this ability to do rapid iteration, where because you're not manually creating the model, you can do many versions of your potential design, right? Get realistic displays, get some thematic renderings off them, understand how they're performing, right? And then decide which one's the best design. So rather than just talk about it, I figured I'd jump in and show a little bit of CityEngine just to set the stage. So one of the biggest features we added last year for CityEngine in 2016 was get map data. So this is CityEngine. I have nothing. I'm going to start from scratch and create a project. I'm going to create a project in Manhattan, so I'm just going to call this New York. Create a new scene. New York. Okay, so I've got my blank scene. I'll go out to the get map data function. It's going to ask me to log in. Have to be logged in if I want to get elevation information. So I get a world map. I can search for a place. And I'll go to New York City. I'm going to zoom in on the southern portion of the island here to find an area of interest. Red box, and then it gives me a couple options on things I can grab and pull in for that box. So I'm going to grab the satellite imagery. I'm just going to use low res for speed purposes. I'm also going to get the elevation terrain that sits underneath it. And it gives me this option if I want to get networks, transportation networks from OpenStreetMap and polygons from OpenStreetMap. So I'm going to select both of those. When I click OK, the first thing it does is it prompts me for a projection. It suggests a projection in UTM based on your location. This is a common request that we get from a lot of CAD customers who may not be deeply familiar with projections. And it'd be nice if they just get one assigned for them automatically so they don't have to worry about it. Click OK, it reaches out, talks to, so what it's actually doing is talking to ArcGIS Online. It's grabbing a piece of imagery, it's grabbing a piece of elevation, then it's talking to OpenStreetMap and seeing what kind of information is available in OpenStreetMap. And you can see there's lots of different kinds of information, parcels, it depends on where you are, the total coverage and the quality of that data. But in this case, I'm really only interested in these building polygons because that's really what I want to show you guys. For the street graph, it gives me all these options for how I want to treat the street graph when I import it, whether I'm going to do cleaning or simplifying. I'm actually just going to turn those off for the moment, so I don't do any of that. It asks how I want to treat that information and give it 3D-ness. So if I have a set of graph, how do I want to align that to the ground? Do I want to project it all to the terrain? Do I want to set it as fixed elevation? Do I want to honor the 3D information that might be in the OpenStreetMap data and then align the terrain to that as an alternative? So it gives you tools for managing the elevation of the graph. Same thing for the footprints, right? So it's going to say for the building footprints that I bring in, I look at what I have underneath me, find the minimum elevation and set me at the minimum. Click OK, goes out there, grabs those shapes. So what it's doing is it's doing an extraction, but it's also going to be looking at the building information that it's grabbing, combing through its attributes and seeing if there's anything in there that represents an elevation. And if, for instance, a number of floors, a total elevation or a max elevation, I'm going to be trying to find that information so it can use it to drive building shape and form. So there I've got my network. It grabs basically any segment that touches it, which is why I've got those little squigglies hanging off the side. I'll just turn off the graph network for the moment and just deal with the building footprint. So here are my buildings. If I look at one of these buildings and look at the inspector, you notice it already has a rule associated with it. So we wrote a rule that consumes OpenStreetMap straight out of the box. So we just select these buildings, generate, right? And we have the beginnings of our 3D city. Now, by default, they come in as colored blocks. I can flip them, so I'm going to turn them all to realistic facades. Let them regenerate. So just like that. Right, so I don't know how long that took me. What was that? 3 minutes, 4 minutes? Got to this representation, and now, right, I can take this, select it, export it out if I want to take it to another piece of software, or I could share it as a scene layer package and publish it on ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise, right? So very, very quick and easy way to create 3D content, and it's built right into the product. So that's one way to quickly get buildings as a context for your public space. Next thing I want to touch on is streets. So we continue to work on and evolve on our streets rules and our streets capabilities. One of our partners has been working on this rule set called Complete Streets, which does really compelling renditions of streets, but also that they have metrics and smarts associated with them. So I just have a network here. Network is generating some street shapes. I'm going to select the street here and just generate one segment. Okay. Nice, boring street. Let's make it more interesting. So if I select the street space itself, this is a Complete Streets rule. It's downloadable, available as an example online, and you can start actually customizing and adding things to the street. And it has a dizzying array of parameters associated with it. I think there's like 170 something parameters in here you can change. So I'm just going to kind of walk down and create a different kind of street as we go. So the first thing I'm going to do is reduce the lane width to 3 meters to give me a little bit of extra space on the right side. I'm going to say I'm in Singapore, so I've got left-hand drive cars instead of right-hand drive cars because I've done a lot of work there. I can customize the crosswalks, so how they look, where they begin for different countries. what they're shaped like, what they're colored like, so you can actually get crosswalks that are appropriate to different nations. I can do angled parking. Might want to make that a little bit wider so the cars fit. Or I can do no parking at all on the side. I can condition the center type, so I could make the center type a barrier. I could make it a boulevard that you could actually drive down. You see that often where you have streets on each side of a very large boulevard. I can drop in a median, so I'm going to make a 2-meter wide median down the center. And it's fighting with me. No, actually, I don't want a bus lane in my median. Why am I not getting my median? My street may not be big enough to actually accept a median. Grab the street edge. And it went away. Stability issues. I blame the rule. My apologies for that. It'll just take me a sec to start up CityEngine, and I'll skip to the next one. Oh, go, generate. I guess the best way is let's just generate them all and see we can see the variety. Okay. And then let's turn this on. Bring some context in around it, some buildings. So we can see different types of streets that it can generate: angled nosed-in parking, different kind of stops. Where's a good bus lane? Maybe no bus lane. Is that a bus lane? Okay, so, right, so there's custom treatments of different lane types, so you can have bus lanes or HOV lanes, and then you can also customize the sidewalks and other features as well by populating with people or bus stops, etc. So pretty kind of amazing and flexible rule. And we're going to continue to grow this in 2017, create a couple versions of one that's one step down that doesn't do the metrics, and then do a new version of this full rule that takes advantage of some of the new street functionality and the way it handles geometry. The last one I wanted to show . So, I mean, we see CityEngine used quite often to do these representations of urban environments and proposed design projects. But people are starting to kind of use it to push the edge of what it can do. This is a multi-square block area we got from a customer. And what they've actually done is, if I rip the terrain off the ground, they've brought in all their 3D utility information and then used a combination of symbology and procedural rendering to turn it into a set of shapes so that you can actually look underground and see all the subsurface features. One of the other things that we did for 2016 is the release of ArcGIS 360 VR, which is a way to publish a scene you have in CityEngine as a little VR experience and then consume it in a set of goggles. And I'm actually going to pass, what I'll do is I'll pass the goggles around at the end so you guys can take a look at this scene. We also have a BIM example so you can actually explore what that looks like when you're immersed in the environment. And just to give you a quick 2-second lesson on how to use it, when you're looking in the goggles and you look around, you'll see little blue cameras. If you look at a blue camera and you tap on the side of the goggle, you'll zoom to that blue camera. If you look down, you'll see what looks like a layer list. You look on an item on the layer list, and you tap, and you'll switch to that set of layers, or toggle the layer visibility on. That's your 2-second introduction to ArcGIS 360 VR. So let's switch back to, so actually one thing I did want to mention, if I go back here, let's see if I can find one. There are some very detailed manholes in this scene that were created with a procedural rule. What we're doing on a weekly basis now is posting an example rule that you can actually download from online. We call it Rule of the Week. So you can actually go do a search for Rule of the Week, and basically it's a rule you can use an example. You can download it, crack it apart, look at the CGA, look at how we actually constructed this rule. And one of the ones we did recently does open spaces and public spaces. So it does a formalized park where it takes an area and splits it and puts walking paths on it, scatters trees, puts hedges around those walking paths, right? Very, very quick way of kind of sketching and creating a park space. Or it does a natural, unimproved urban open space area where it just scatters trees and grass across a hill. So that's another place you can, if you're looking for rules, you can just go search for Rule of the Week, or go to arcgis.com and search for RPK rule package, right? And get access to some rules that way. And we're going to be doing, Pascal and I will be doing a session on CGA and creating rule packages later this week on Thursday at 1 p.m. And if you like what you see in that 360 VR, tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. in this room, we're actually going to have a session on VR and learning how to use VR. So 2016, what did we work on for 2016? One is integrating CityEngine with the ArcGIS platform. So being able to pull in those base maps and elevations in with the get map data. Being able to actually publish what you have in CityEngine as a scene layer package, and then push that up to ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise and stand it up as a service. So the things you author in CityEngine can now be directly published and then consumed across the platform. We're also supporting feature layers now, so you can actually log in inside CityEngine into your portal or ArcGIS Online account, and if you have Polygon feature layers, you can grab those and bring those directly into CityEngine. And along with that was all the portal management for publishing, sharing, and viewing items that went along with that. The CGA continued to grow and its capabilities. CGA computer generated architecture is the language behind CityEngine. So we added new functions for splitting areas, new functions for inner rectangles, primitives, a variety of new abilities that didn't exist before. So we had a split ability where you could take a shape and split it along an axis, right, horizontally or vertically. Now you can actually split it by area, and every single part inside that will be the exact same area. And that's kind of an interesting concept if you start thinking about CGA going inside the buildings. So if you imagine I could take a floor of a building and split everything into rooms or suites that are all the same size, essentially apartments, right? When one use for it, or I can use it to split lots, right? So I can split a lot that's defined by a street into multiple parcels and guarantee that every single parcel is the same size. We had a function for getting the inner rectangle inside a shape, so you give it basically an orientation, and it would find the largest rectangle that would fit at that orientation. What we've done is we've enhanced the rectangle tool, so now instead of just getting the shape that's inside, you can also get the shape that's outside. So if you imagine I can fill all my parcels with rectangles, scale them down to be a certain size of percent coverage, and then take the remainders out of those and cover them with green space, like from using that parks rule or the natural unimproved space rule. So both of those things are basic places where the rule can split off. The other thing that was really, really cool is I no longer have to necessarily specify an angle. I can say, for this shape, give me the biggest rectangle that's going to fit in here, and then scale back from that. So that basically can auto-orient this kind of insertion of rectangular geometry into shapes. It has a lot of potential for use in zoning and creation of design. We added in a lot of primitives that people can use. in order to generate shapes. A great example of that is we had a rule of the week 4 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago. It was the Taj Mahal, but it was created purely from inserted primitives. So nothing was created off of initial shapes. So a great example of how you might use primitives. And you can, of course, control the resolution of these primitives depending on kind of what you need and how the quality you want to be represented as. When you're bringing in 3D models from outside, we are respecting and inserting with the native size. So that's carried over when you bring it in CityEngine. We also improved the way we handle normals and soften normals. So you can all soft edges or all hard edges or blend those. We also added some tools for looking at and fixing, I guess you could say, broken shapes, broken features, conform normals. So we can look at and make sure that all the vertices are consistent, that the normals are ordered correctly, that all the faces are facing outside. This has some interesting implications for just use inside as a tool inside the ArcGIS Pro, writing a rule that you could apply to a building that you, for instance, got SketchUp that might have faces on the wrong side, and this can flip them around and repair that for you. And then a lot more. So we had a limbic export for the people who were doing the high-end visualization. A lot of people wanted to have a limbic rather than going through Collada or OBJ. Upgraded to Python 2.7, supporting new file geodatabase 1.4. We upgraded the graphics pipeline to OpenGL 4.1, and I mentioned ArcGIS 360 VR, which we're going to explore in this room tomorrow at 5:30. So 16 was a pretty exciting year, and people continue to use CityEngine. I mean, URA a few years ago was a good example of doing a planning project. They were doing it kind of at the district scale. We've had people to use it and export it to a high-end visualization, like this example of flooding in Paris, and then House of Levine doing very kind of specific design projects on that neighborhood level and working on how they integrate that with SketchUp. So to kind of talk a little bit more in depth about how it's being used in planning design, I'm going to turn it over to Brooks Patrick.
Thanks, Eric. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, great. So as Eric mentioned, Brooks Patrick. I'm on a team here in Redlands working with CityEngine customers. I have a background in landscape architecture and planning. And so what I'll do now is actually walk you through a couple of industry case studies, looking at how folks are actually using what Eric just displayed in CityEngine. So how I'm going to do this is through some situations that are frequently faced by planners when doing their work. And really it's the paradigm shift in planning is that there's more data, there's less time, there's new processes to do things. So when we talk about CityEngine and its value to these workflows, it brings value in that it makes these very labor-intense 3D models very easy to generate. So the first point we'll cover is actually procedural modeling for 3D context. This is what we find in both the public and private sector planning for generating large, massive 3D models that don't rely heavily on, for instance, photogrammetry to get to that level of detail that we've been showing. We'll then go through adding 3D detail to existing 2D site plans, integrating a SketchUp library within a rule. This is what we see mostly in the private sector as the primary use. And then we'll go through an example of 3D zoning that's based on regulatory standards. And this is what we find mostly in the public sector's use of CityEngine. So for the first one, procedural modeling for 3D context, I call it an assignment because I would like to challenge everyone here to actually go and explore these use cases further and how they would work for you and your work. The first one, however, just to kind of set the stage of 3D coming from CityEngine, how it fits within the larger 3D story at Esri. What we primarily find are 3D base maps that are right here on the far right, untextured. However, geometry-wise, they're correct, and they're generated from LiDAR data using CityEngine rules. We also find cities like San Francisco and others with textured models from photogrammetry, which can actually leverage the procedurally generated geometry for that initial base. We also have new layers, 3D Mesh and 3D Point Cloud, which are now supported not only within desktop, but also within the web. So when we talk about 3D, it's important to note that everything works from desktop to web when we talk about ArcGIS Online and server, et cetera. So we see the best available data come through, and then we use that to generate the model. So this is an example model generated with our current local government 3D base map workflows, which we'll provide links to. This is a free set of tools that looks at your LiDAR data and actually does complex roof form extraction. And as you can see here, the level of detail in which we're able to attain just from LiDAR is quite amazing. This type of modeling is enabling massive 3D models. Just to give you an idea of how massive, this is Cape Cod. That was Miami-Dade County. So when I say Miami, I mean the county-wide 3D model. So procedural technology is being used at scale. That's when it becomes almost invaluable. So we match it with the LiDAR data and are able to generate these massive 3D city models. Now, as you can see here, they have correct roof structures, and it's usually what we find is that they're generated on the fly like this and then combined with higher detail models from other sources. So this rule that you were seeing in that image was very simple. The CGA code itself, as they mentioned, there's going to be another session diving into that. But when it comes to a rule, they don't have to be very complex to be very useful. And so I'll leave you with that. The generation of that base map is really the first step, whether you're in the private sector or public sector, and we can use these rules to do so. When it comes to actually doing the work, we use procedural rules to add 3D detail to existing site plans. So let me take you through a couple of examples here. This is an example of a, let's say, vacant mall, and courtesy of our friends at Housel Levine for all of their great work that I get to show off. This is, for instance, a site plan that can be generated in AutoCAD or Rhino or SketchUp. It doesn't necessarily matter. But what we're able to do is take these site plans and generate the three-dimensional form, just in this case based on what kind of layer it was that you were seeing initially colored by parking lot in blue, or red for buildings, or green for lawn areas. So by applying these rules and by cleaning up the geometry, just from CityEngine alone, you get very compelling renderings that allow for not only that realism that you see here and high precision geometry from the rule, but also it enables you to very quickly make iterations. So flexibility is why we're going this route, because we can reapply and regenerate as many times as we need to. Another example here, another abandoned mall. We're not saying CityEngine is doing away with sketching, okay? We take the traditional methodology in planning and design, and we are able to translate those sketches into the actual plan itself. So once we have that concept developed, we then use the rules to actually add the realism, right? So I went through very quickly in the beginning, but just to show you the rules that were used, this is one that was coded for the entire firm to actually use at will for many different projects, for many different iterations through projects. So this building rule, as you see here, can be shared and then applied, as you see here, for these different projects and rendered. So this was actually rendered, I believe, in V-Ray through SketchUp. So another important part of CityEngine's role in the design process is talking to many different data sources. You can bring things in, you can bring things out, and really integrates nicely into the pipeline. So in this case, you're seeing parking lots laid out procedurally as well as lawn areas and streets, and we're able to iterate. As you see here, we've gotten rid of a building, added a pond, maybe increased the density of housing on one side. This type of iteration is very manually intense if you were to use SketchUp or Rhino. That's how it's being done today in the industry. But what we see are pressures in the industry to do more with less, and this is where we see procedural now helping with that type of very labor intensive and not necessarily assisting with concept development in the design process. This is just work at the end of the day. We also see the integration of SketchUp libraries within rules. So this example, again, thanks to the folks at Hauser-Levine, we're able to take those sketches, lay out streets as Eric was showing and Pascal will show a little bit later, and very quickly generate the geometry necessary to look at different parceling schemes. So this is a small suburban development. But what you see here are actually SketchUp buildings. A lot of firms have existing libraries that they've used on ongoing projects. So being able to integrate this highly detailed library into a rule that allows for the structural placement of these buildings, as you see here, allows you to very quickly get to an even higher level of detail than you would normally in CityEngine by actually adding that touch of manual detailing that you see here. So very quickly we can start to then shift around the streets and the overall sizing of the initial lots and see the buildings adjust. So this is a little bit different use of that rule, but very valuable at the end of the day. We also see CityEngine rules being coded for use in local government, and a classic example is 3D zoning. And this is a process of looking at existing zoning standards, like setbacks, step backs, max heights, etc., and being able to translate that into the CGA code. Every city is different when it comes to zoning codes, so what we see is a rule that matches a city's zoning code. And there are some similarities, like all zoning codes may have a setback, so we can use those inputs to actually feed the rule. So currently our zoning rules, they do a lot, and so I would say the sky's the limit on what's possible with CGA in terms of the translation of complex legal frameworks into visual representations like you see here. So with this type of zoning rule, we can also start to look at how it's done in ArcGIS Pro when it comes to sky planes. Being able to combine procedural generation of geometry with the reductive nature of sky planes and view sheds that affect our zoning codes, we can really start to build in the realism necessary to meet the standards of visualizing these very complex inputs. We can also take that model from CityEngine or ArcGIS Pro, wherever we actually apply those rules, and publish to the web. So CityEngine models being published to the web allow us to navigate through the model through a commercial web browser. You might have been familiar with the CityEngine web scene, and with these new web scenes, what we're able to do is get to a very high level of detail and still maintain the resolution of the model we want. At the end of the day, you can see here, we can actually talk through the process of the zone being split off by the sky plane here from the road. So these web scenes are great for the storytelling aspect of the final professional products that you'd be creating. We can even start to procedurally generate facades to give us an idea of scale in these types of scenes. And all of this is automated by the data feeding in. And that's where we see the most benefit to local government workflows. So just to wrap up, before I hand it over to Pascal, we actually have a webinar next week. So if you are available on Wednesday morning Pacific time, I'd like to invite you to come and join our webinar, because I won't have to show off these projects. I'll have Devin from Hauser-Levine actually do it. And we're also joined by some SketchUp guys as well to talk about how we're integrating. So again, the bit.ly is right here in red, but we'll pass around the folder and we can send out some links a little bit later. Thank you very much, and over to you, Pascal.
You want me to introduce it?
Okay.
I'll set the stage. So, CityEngine in 2017, what's coming? So we're adding a variety of new capabilities. This is just an example. I'm going to have a slide with it that's a little bit more complete. Touch on them briefly. One is we have variants or scenarios. So the ability to actually separate your layers out into groups that represent different kind of design alternatives, and be able to compare those and manage those in visibility to see them side by side. And then the dashboards, which we added a couple years ago, have been built out, and they're scenario and context sensitive. So when I'm comparing two variants, two scenarios, I can actually see the values that they're creating side by side and see which one's better or worse depending on my metrics. Local edits. This is a huge one. If you procedurally generate a building, About a year and a half ago, we created these things called handles. So I expose the height of a building as a handle, and I could change it on screen. Or I could expose the width of a window, and I could change it on screen. When I change the width of that window, all the windows changed. So local edits allow me to take a building, say, okay, let me do local edits on this. I can change the width of a window, and it doesn't affect everything else. I can change the panel to be a wall. I can change the setback on the 5th floor to be 10 feet, on the 6th floor to be 8 feet, all with these handles, all interactively, all on the individual pieces of the building that are procedurally generated. So this is huge. This is going to turn procedural more into a 3D modeling tool than a kind of an en masse creation tool. So a lot of implications, and that's pretty exciting. CGA is continuing to grow, so we're continuing to add new functions. The big one that we're kind of tackling is context. So making rules understand what's near them, what they're intersecting, what are the values that are associated with the feature. And we're starting with proximity, so how close I am to something. So in this example, right, I have a tree, and the tree is detecting how close I am to the edge, and therefore how big can my canopy be. Where it's going to go is, I can have the edge of a parcel. The parcel says, what is the closest street next to me? Oh, it's a category 4 street. I know that as an edge, I need to set back 25 feet from that. So every single edge can individually determine how it's going to handle that. So this is going to be a really, really powerful tool for writing zoning codes, really, really specifically. And so that's pretty exciting. And then we're starting to add in interactive tools. And we started with Measure, pretty basic tool. But it's a cool measure tool, point-to-point measurement, and then it gives you the horizontal and vertical measurements as well on the fly. That's something that we're looking to make a cross-platform implementation of, so it'll probably go to other products. And then in the future, we're going to be looking to add probably a next release, viewshed interactively, and then we'll probably look at line of sight and some solar and some shadow analysis as well. The idea is these are not the typical ESRI geoprocessing tools where you do something, you stop, you build a model, you punch, and you go get a cup of coffee and maybe make a sandwich and maybe go out and come back the next day and see what happened. These are all meant to be near real-time tools, immediate feedback, or design time as we call it, where you're actually making changes to your design while you're doing the analysis. The other thing is just improving the ease of use. So changing the look and feel of it, cleaning up the icons, cleaning up the toolbars, removing unnecessary tools, modernizing the icons so that they look a little bit sharper, simplifying some of the tools. So get map data was really, really cool, but we totally redid the UI for it, so it's even easier. And then revising the startup UX. So it's going to look like a newer, crisper product and be easier to use. So that's pretty exciting. So this is kind of a full list. I mentioned, scenario management, local edits, interactive 3D analytics, user experience, and user interface improvements. We're going to continue to expand our platform support. So we want to add in live syncing to feature services. We want to move to supporting other types of feature services like lines of points and support export of different types of scene packages, and then the better startup and launch. And so we're going to have 2 releases this year, and we're going to have a beta. So if you're interested in participating in the beta, we'll probably have a beta end of this month, and it'll run for 6 weeks or so, and then we'll do a release in the June timeframe, and then we'll have a second release probably around September, October this year. So to actually show us some of what's coming, I'm going to turn over to Pascal, and we'll actually see it in action.
Okay. Thanks very much, Eric. So yeah, I got asked to show the alpha version of CityEngine. So what you see here is could crash my computer any second. No, it's actually very stable. And so here you see first the new user interface. In the office, they call it also the white CityEngine, because it's like the Beatles' White Album a bit. Because everything got cleaned up. We really did many small things like stuff which people complain on the internet, and and one, as Eric already mentioned, one of the biggest feature requests was measurement tools. So finally we have a measurement tool, and a pretty cool one. So here you see we actually invented something we call these laser lines, which are pretty handy, so you can figure out you want to be, and then here you see now, you see you can see here also the height of the building, and here the horizontal distance, and of course the main distance. And we have also an area tool. This is not finished yet. Will look cooler, but all these kind of things are in there. So we really listened to you. We really got lots of feedback for CityEngine, and finally really had time and resources to really invest into it and really make it a super nice user experience, which is especially for planners which work with SketchUp. They really want to have a nice user experience. It has a modern look and feel, and all these kind of things. So it's a really kind of, it really makes it's really fun to work with CityEngine now, just from the user interface perspective. Then we are going to also add some new contents. So what you see here are actually are, for example, fences. So we want to have in the Esri library, we want to add more stuff, and here you see, for example, there are many different types of fences which you can just create with a few clicks, and here these are the ones, the political fences. Sorry, that was coincidence. There's even the Berlin Wall. So all kinds of stuff there. Then we also add more plans. Probably not sure if this is going to be in the .0 version, but we really want to add a newer plant library with level of detail and across the platform. So this is going to be a huge thing. So here to remember, so these are the current plans which we have. There are 3 representations: the model representation, the very simple representation, and then the schematic representation.
So when you say multi-LOD, it will be multi-LOD model representation as well.
It means they will be fast on the web, basically.
Okay, that's the intent.
So these are, so content is obviously a big thing. Then another big thing is what Eric mentioned already are the so-called local edits. So procedural modeling typically means I can go change here the window width or the window height, or I can go change it here to like 1 meter. It changes it everywhere. So this is typical procedural modeling, and this is a very simple rule which just breaks down the thing. So now the very cool thing is what we can do is we have this new local edit mode, and we can go in and just change one window. So this is actually pretty big. So because you now can very easily modify your procedural model without much effort. So let me give you some examples here. I can here select, for example, the whole column, and this is typical. Like on top of the doors, you typically have the escalators. Then you can make it here, another thing. And nice thing is it still works here. Then here is, let's go to these guys here. Let's add here some balconies. So all these kind of things you can do now, and then you can do you can basically everything which is possible in your rule, you can now do it locally. So means it really becomes a tool where you can where you can model, like I think there's actually no other tool out there where you can do such things. This combination of procedural modeling and then having these local edit capabilities. So yeah, so and this is of use in many things. So this is not just to change a facade. This is also, so when I go here, for example, I can put here the plant distributor rule. So these are a bit big. Let's go here and say we have tropical. So tropical trees here, and I make them a bit sparser. And now let's make it real models. So yeah, that's now the one of the rules coming with CityEngine. That's the plant distributor rule. And the cool thing now again with local edits is before, what you can do is you can go in and say like, okay, I want to have the stuff on the borders. Okay, let's make one more again. I want to have the plants on the borders, or I want to have them in the center. But you didn't really have control of the whole thing, because as the guy said, procedural modeling is all about scale. Like, you want to make a rule and then let's just do it. However, sometimes you really want to go in there and then really correct a few things. So for example, this guy here, I cannot, to actually move this guy now, I would have to export the scene and go to, or do some tricks, and it's very complicated. Now I can go in here, I can go select this tree and move it away. And it's still a procedural rule, however I can modify it. So same thing applies also for zoning. So let's say you have this rule which creates on every street side, it creates a setback of 5 meters, because that's the rule by the law. However, there are always exceptions. Maybe there's this old street which is where they have some special thing where it's just 2 meters. So what do you do? Do you create an interface for this one old street in your rule? No. So here, this is with a local edit. You go in and say like, okay, for this street, I edit it locally. Then it's okay. So yeah, so this is going to be a pretty cool thing with lots of potential, and it's going to be really interesting what people are going to build with this stuff. Then the other big thing are the scenarios, and here you see this old Philadelphia scene, and when you have here an area which you want to mask out and basically say, okay, this is a redevelopment area, you see that this covers about, it covers vegetation, it covers street furniture, it covers 2 types of building types. So it's a really big problem. So currently people have to work, when they now basically want to create this kind of planning, like as it is now, and then how does it look in the future, they typically work with layers. So it means you take all these guys here, cut them out and paste them into some new layer group. Then you work with layers, switch off, switch on, and this kind of thing. This is the same thing as it's done in Photoshop, or every tool is doing it like this. And so yeah, what we currently try to do is to have scenario planning as a first-class user experience in CityEngine. So it means we can now go in here and then go and basically say, okay, this is a scenario, and then it moves everything there. So it means I did this already here. So I masked out this stuff, and it's now, so this is now the as-is state. And I can now here switch the scenario. So here you see, this is here I can create scenarios and I can manage them, I can clone them, and I can duplicate them. Each of them has a color, this is actually important. And I can now here also make a third scenario, so I can make as many scenarios as I want. and they can very easily switch between them. And so the cool thing is, yeah, I can do some stuff here, and then of course I also have the dashboards. So here, these are my live dashboards. So yeah, these are the new dashboards, by the way. These are all cards, and you can move them around, and you can really build your own dashboards. You can have different pages. We're still working on the visuals, but yeah, it will look very nice. The rules can also control the dashboards. The colors, so it means if you have rules where you want that industrial usage is violet, then industrial usage is probably not violet, but yeah, so you can control that as you like. So now let's have a look here. So these are the new dashboards, and now the cool thing in the dashboards is you can also turn on all the dashboards are scenario capable. So then you see the performance of the two designs here. So here's the other design, and you see, for example, that this design, so this is the blue design. The blue one has much more office space because of this guy here. Yeah, here you see it's got selected, so here it's highlighted. And in general, the gloss floor area is bigger in the blue one because of this big ugly block here. Yeah. Then I can also have side-by-side views. So here now you see them side by side, and again I can work on both at the same time if I want to. So, oh, that's this guy here. Yeah. So, and then I can also here, for example, that's an interesting one. This guy is shared across both scenarios. So I really have basically limitless possibilities how I can do that, and I can also have I can have 20 scenarios at the same time. So, and this is, for example, urban planning departments. They are getting typically it's about 10 different if they have an RFP or something and they get really proposals, they typically select like 10 which they look near and which they then put into some comparison application like this one here, where they can easily switch between these different scenarios. And it's actually also pretty cool to play with the stuff. When I go here back to the fences, I think they were in scenario 1. So I can really go easily in there, and so here I draw something here, and I can draw something here, and so they are not. So I can very easily just draw stuff in my different scenarios and do stuff. It's very, very natural to do. So yeah. So we are still, as said, that's an alpha version, but as Eric said, we are very interested in getting your feedback. I think in about 2 weeks we will have the first one on the early adopter program, the alpha version, and then about 2 or 3 weeks later the beta version. And so yeah, let us know if you have some feedback.
One quick question, navigation, did you want to mention anything?
Oh yeah, the navigation is just got better. I think you will not feel the navigation anymore. So this is more like a cross-platform thing where we work in the web and with Pro and CityEngine, where we try to figure out 3D navigation, 3D. So you do not have to. It magically figures out if you are looking at an object, or it really tries to figure out what you are looking at, and it's pretty smart and works well.
Yeah, perfect. So if you're interested in the CityEngine Alpha or Beta, feel free to drop a card in here. If you're interested in getting an email about the upcoming webinar that's coming or some of the zoning and plannings, drop in here. If you're We'll probably include all the links to all the rules of the week as well. So if you're interested in any of that information, feel free to stop by and drop a card in this envelope, and we'll send that information to you. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Do you have an ability to export more directly to Unity?
Yes, we worked on that and improved it. Come tomorrow to the session on VR. There, I actually I give detailed information about like how to export to Unity.
Any other questions?
Yeah. In web scenes, we work on that. It's one of the goals. There's also GeoPlanner who has a cool scenario concept, and yeah, we actually meet this afternoon to start working on this. So.
Yeah, the target is to build a cross-platform scenario capability that'd be honored in the web scene viewer, the JavaScript API, the runtime ArcGIS Pro, CityEngine, and GeoPlanner.
Basically something like time-enabled layer. You want to have scenario-enabled scenes.
Yes?
Yeah, can you mix your elevation sources, so LiDAR for the urban area, and then a DEM for the mountains, and then road elevation for the rest?
So CityEngine is just importing a single elevation service as its source. So if you can blend those and either publish them as a service and do an extract against that service, that'd be one way to do it, or blend them on a desktop product like ArcGIS Pro and then bring them in. That would be the way to do that.
Process it and then put it in.
Yeah, exactly. Any other questions? Okay, if you have individual questions, feel free to come up and ask us. The Gear VR is still making its way around if you want to wait for that and take a peek at looking through the rose-colored glasses. And thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.